Most of the oldest towns and villages in Britain have gained a resident ghost or two over the centuries, but when it comes to the ghost of Pluckley in Kent, the spiritual populace has enough members to start their own football team and have a few left over for reserves. I'm Bleaki, and today I'm going to tell you about the ghost of Pluckley, a town that was named the most haunted village in England by the Guinness World Records in 1989. From lost souls who can be heard screaming from the woodland, to a lady of the land who's been seen uncontrollably wailing, looking for her baby. Pluckley in Kent, UK, was referenced in the Domesday Book in 1086. At this time, the village was already quite significantly developed and populated. The village is relatively small, having just over 1,000 people living there, and is nestled in the lush Kent countryside just a short drive away from London. The parish church, dedicated to St Nicholas, that still stands there today, dates back to the 13th century. Inside this church is a section dedicated to the Deering family, a prominent lineage from Pluckley, who you will learn about later in this video. There have been many tragic deaths in the village over the thousands of years it has served as a settlement, which makes it no surprise that several restless spirits still linger. The first entity I would like to talk about is the highwayman of Fright Corner, which is a very fitting name for this location. This highwayman would use the location to jump out of trees to scare and rob poor travellers. The villagers eventually decided that something had to be done about the criminal, and in the 18th century, a group of them decided to find the hiding highwayman. One of them engaged in a sword fight with the criminal and managed to overpower him, pinning him to an oak tree with his sword, leaving him to die. The tree has since disappeared, but during the early hours of winter evenings, the ghost and the tree are said to manifest on the corner, with the sword holding the slumped phantom body in place. Some witnesses of this spirit have claimed seeing the final fight being reenacted, with the outcome always the same. As we're on the subject of the wooded areas of Pluckley, let's talk about the tragic tale of the Headmaster. Henry Turriff was the headmaster of the Smarden School in the 1920s and was close friends with a miller called Richard Buss in Pluckley. Henry would visit his friend every Sunday to discuss politics, but one week he failed to show. After some investigation, Richard Buss discovered that his friend was missing. A short time later, on a lane called Dickie Buss's Lane, named after Richard, a group of school children were walking to school. The party were all in good spirits and were playfully strolling down the lane. This all changed when one of the boys stopped and pointed up at a tree. The rest of them gasped at the sight of their teacher hanging from a branch. The reason for this tragic end was never discovered. Ever since, on certain moonlit nights, the apparition of Henry Turriff has been clearly seen, slowly swinging back and forth, along with the light breeze. Sadly, Richard Buss's spirit also failed to move on after his death. The miller was well known in the village and is believed to still haunt the now ruined and abandoned windmill called the Pinnocks. Richard closed his mill in 1930, shortly after the death of his friend Henry Turriff. 9 years later, the mill was destroyed when it was struck by lightning during a storm. Regardless, it seems that he still has unfinished business at the mill and is often seen before thunderstorms hit as a warning to the village he devoted himself to in life. Is Richard tethered to the land out of duty? Or does he feel guilt over not preventing the tragic actions of his friend? Maybe he's still hanging around for one more chat about politics with his friend, although a lot has changed in Parliament since he breathed his last breath. Many who have lived in Pluckley over the years have reported hearing phantom horse hooves clattering down the road. Some have even witnessed phantom carriages, especially along Maltman's Hill. A babysitter once claimed that she saw a coach bound down the street as if it was real, which had a light which flooded from the windows as two horses pulled it along. Back in 1997, a driver shared his story of almost crashing when he heard the clatter of horse hooves on the cobbles, although the road he was driving on was tarmac. The sound was so close that he thought he was about to drive right into a horse rider who was hidden by the darkness and swerved. When he got out of his car to make sure the horse rider was okay and to calm down, however, the road was empty and deathly silent. Enjoying the video so far? If the answer is a big fat yes, then why not consider hitting the subscribe button, ringing the notification bell and giving the video a thumbs up. It's the very best way to support me and the channel. Also, drop a comment below. I love interacting with you guys. Let's carry on. Now let's talk about the prominent Deering family, whose legacy has left an imprint on Pluckley for generations. I think we can all agree that there are very few places scarier than a cemetery, except for maybe a McDonald's at 10 PM on a Saturday night, but the graveyard at St Nicholas's is definitely more terrifying than most. During the 17th century, after Lady Deering passed away following complications of a stillbirth, the distraught Sir Edward Deering decided to have his beloved encased in 3 lead coffins and an oak one to stop her body from decomposing. She was then buried in the family crypt at St Nicholas's Church. If Lord Deering wanted to keep his wife looking like her earthly appearance, then he succeeded. Ever since her death, people have claimed seeing the White Lady wander in the graveyard, wailing emotionally as she searches for the grave of her stillborn baby. The spirit of Lady Deering is also said to still haunt the library of her old family home, Surredon. Sadly, the grand house was destroyed by a fire in 1952, but the spirit of Lady Deering is still said to haunt the property and was even seen by staff of the US Embassy when they were using the land. In fact, one employee, Mr. Walter Winans, stayed up one night on her Christmas Eve in the hopes of seeing the famous Lady in White. When she suddenly appeared before him, however, the employee freaked out and shot the ghost with his rifle. Winans said that the spirit vanished through a panelled wall, which might have led to a tunnel which was supposed to link the house with the church. So like many ghost stories passed down from generation to generation, the details of the stories can get altered. For example, there is another conflicting story of a Deering female family member who shares the same backstory, only she was buried in 7 lead-lined coffins instead of 3, with a red rose put on top, which gave her the name of the Red Lady. Some do claim that they were both indeed separate ghosts and were related in life, but that would be one huge coincidence. But who was this spirit? Well, it turns out that Sir Edward Deering got through more wives than Donald Trump gets through bottles of fake tan. As many of them died in their early 20s, it's hard to pinpoint which wife the Lady in White was, although it would be between Elizabeth Tufton, Anne Ashburnham, Mary Mitcham, Elizabeth Henshaw or Selina Ferres. So yeah, Eddie kept himself busy. Another well-known building in Pluckley is Greystones. The house was originally built in 1863 and was named the Rectory Cottage as it was the home for the rector of the St Nicholas Church. Nowadays, the most famous resident at Greystones is the spirit of a monk who has been seen drifting among the trees. It is said that he fell in love with the daughter of a neighbouring family. Sadly, the relationship wasn't meant to be, as shortly after, she died under tragic circumstances which sent the monk into a state of depression and bitterness. Afterwards, he would be seen walking in the green fields and down the leafy lanes, an activity he enjoyed doing with his partner. While he did find comfort with another woman later on, it is believed that he never fully got over his first love. After his death, the phantom monk continued walking the same paths he did in life. In 1989, an American journalist reported that during a walk, he spotted an unmistakable brown-robed figure drifting behind the house. He rushed over to see who the man was, but found no one in the area. Rose Court, a quaint English village home, is incredibly picturesque and has stood in the village for over 250 years, but unfortunately, it does hide a bleak history. The house was built by a member of the Deering family for his mistress during the Tudor times. While that may sound spicy enough, it turns out that the monk of Greystones is said to have also had a relationship with the mistress after losing his first love. Rose Court has more love triangles than Love Island. When the Deering family member discovered that his bit on the side had a bit on the side, the poor woman felt like she needed to escape by taking a deadly cocktail of poisonous berries. Ever since, she has been said to haunt Rose Court, especially the gardens between 4 and 5 PM. In fact, many people have reported hearing a phantom voice calling after her 2 dogs. I feel like this is how I'll spend the afterlife, forever calling after my dogs to either get them to come inside or getting them to put down something gross they are trying to eat off the ground. As the story goes, when her body was eventually found, it looked like she had been looking across the field towards Greystones, the home of her other love. Now, while that does make a good romantic ghost story, it is important to know that Greystones wasn't built until 1863. With that being said, it doesn't mean that a building didn't stand on the site beforehand where the monk lived. Many strange things have been reported at Rose Court over the years, such as items being moved around at night, strange groaning sounds coming from thin air, and long sighs waking people up in the early hours of the morning. Pluckley Bridge is a fantastic spot to sit back and watch the world go by. The tranquil location is so calming that it would be hard to believe that the location was the scene of a tragic accident that took the life of an old gypsy woman. The woman was known for selling watercress that she collected from the stream below. She was a popular local resident who was considered eccentric but harmless. After each day of selling, the watercress woman would sit on the wall of the bridge and watch the sunset while smoking her clay pipe and drinking spirits from a battered old flask. One evening, however, she fell asleep after a few too many drinks. The pipe dropped from her lips and the sparks of the tobacco fell onto her rags. Unfortunately, the flask had also dropped from her hand and leaked the highly flammable alcohol onto her clothes. The woman erupted into flame, but her agonising screams were heard by no one. The next day, locals discovered the smouldering remains of the woman with her old flask and shattered clay pipe lying next to her. Ever since, her spirit has been sighted by many people at the bridge. In the initial years after her death, people claim to have seen her ghost screaming in pain, surrounded by spectral flames. In later years, however, the spirit seems to be losing its power and is only seen as a faint pink glow that floats above the spot the watercress woman horrifically lost her life. A disturbing haunting to occur at Pluckley is in the aptly named Screaming Woods, named after the activity that goes on there. It is said that over the years, many people have reported hearing screaming men and women within the woods after night has fallen and a mist draws in. It is believed that the sounds are of those who got lost and died in the woods. Those brave enough to spend a night in the woods have reported being scared out of their minds by sudden and anguished screams from somewhere deep within the skeletal trees and the shadowed paths. While it could be explained as a trick of the mind, some have said that the screams have also made birds flap away from the trees. There are plenty more ghosts haunting Pluckley, but far too many to cover in one video. This includes 3 ghosts haunting the Blacksmith's Arms pub, who are believed to be a Tudor maid, a coachman who looks longingly into the fire, and a cavalier who paces the upstairs rooms. The Black Horse pub is also haunted by a spirit that moves items from drinkers but returns them at a later date. There is also stories of a colonel who unalived himself in Park Wood and is seen wearing his military uniform walking through the trees. A woman wearing a bonnet has also been seen in the Deering Arms, which was once a hunting lodge. Customers who have seen her thought she was a living person, but are shocked when she suddenly vanishes into thin air. It seems that in Pluckley, you can't even go to the local bakery for a sausage roll without running into a ghost. During renovations to the building, an old Victorian fireplace was removed, which exposed the original hearth. This seemingly kicked off a series of unexplainable paranormal events, such as phantom footsteps being heard stamping across the room, like Michael Flatley rushing to the bathroom before stopping at the fireplace. Some residents have reported feeling an icy chill engulf them while in the building, even on hot summer days. I'll end things on my favourite story concerning the haunting of Pluckley. One evening in the early 1970s, a group of psychic researchers managed to talk the then rector, Reverend John Pittock, to allow them to spend the night locked in the church. While they were armed with cameras, tape recorders, thermometers and other apparatus, they settled down to watch and wait for any spirits. Unfortunately, they were bitterly disappointed. When the vicar came to let them out the next morning, they complained about how nothing really happened and that the occasional visits from the vicar's dog, also locked in the church, helped pass the boredom. When they said this, however, the vicar raised an eyebrow and told them, "Actually, I don't have a dog." Maybe a phantom pooter is responsible for stealing my custard creams off the table after all, and not my girls. Although I highly doubt it. Some scientists researching the concentration of paranormal activity in the most haunted village in England believe it could be down to geological magnetism and place memories. These are like a recording of history, especially traumatic events, which are then imprinted and played back through the natural elements within the earth. Of course, this is yet to be proven. So, is the ancient village truly a hotspot for the paranormal, with its tragic history still being replayed to this very day? Or is it nothing more than folktales shared between people for entertainment that have taken on a life of their own? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. With the high influx of hauntings and the many paranormal stories, people often flock to Pluckley to investigate it for themselves, especially at Halloween. This understandably annoys the residents of the small village and has often resulted in them calling the police to get the ghost hunters moved on. So if this video inspires any ghost hunters to pay a visit to Pluckley, just remember, while it is unlikely that a ghost can harm you, an angry Karen armed with a broom certainly can, so be respectful on your visit. And as always, sleep well, friends.